Happy New Year, investor friends. I'm michellemarki, and if you have any resolution for yourself, one might be to learn from others' mistakes, because one of the best investors of all time, Charlie Munger, told many stories at the Daily Journal Corporation's annual meeting in 2019, including some stories about Mozart, where normally you might have a high esteem of someone like Mozart, but it actually can reveal a lot of issues and problems that you want to avoid. And by doing that, you're bound to become rich. So if that sounds great to you, please be sure to like and subscribe and enjoy Charlie's wisdom.
Let me tell you another story that I think is an interesting one about the modern life. But this goes back to a different time. And this man has this wonderful horse. And it's just a marvelous horse. It's got an easy gait and good looking and everything. It just works wonderfully. But also occasionally just gets so he's dangerous and vicious and causes enormous damage and trouble and breaks arms and legs for his rider and so on. And he goes to the vet and says, "What can I do about this horse?" And the vet says, "That's a very easy problem and I'm glad to help you." He says, "What should I do?" And the man says, "The next time your horse is behaving well, sell it." Well, think of how immoral that is. And haven't I just described what private equity has to do? When private equity has to sell something that's really troublesome, they hire an investment banker. And what does the investment banker do? He makes a projection. You can't, I have never seen such expertise in my whole life as is created in making projections in investment banking. There is no business so lousy it can't get a wonderful projection. But is that a great way to make a living, to have phony projections and use it to make money out of people you look right into the eyes of? I would say no. And by and large, Warren and I, we never tried to make money out of stupidity of our dumb buyers. We tried to make money by buying. And if we were selling horse shit, we didn't want to pretend it was a cure for arthritis. And I think it's better to go through life our way instead of theirs. And I think it's always been this way. I think there's always been chicanery. Think of the carnivals, the carny operator. Think how much trickery there is in a carny operation. And people just seek out the weaknesses of their fellow man and take advantage. And you have to get wise enough so you avoid them all. And you can't avoid them if they're in your family. I have no solution to that one. But where you have a fair choice, there are just so many people that should be avoided. My father had this best friend and client. And he also had this other client who was a big blowhard. And he was always working for the big blowhard, and he wasn't ever working for his wonderful client whom I admired. And I said, "Why do you do this?" And he said, "Charlie, you idiot." He says, "The big blowhard is an endless source of legal troubles. He's always in trouble, overreaching and misbehaving and so forth. Whereas Grant McFadden treats everybody right, the employees, the customers, everything. And he gets involved with some psychotic, he walks over there and makes a graceful exit immediately. So a man like that doesn't need a lawyer." And my father was trying to teach me something, and it really worked. I spent my whole life trying to be like Grant McFadden. And I want to tell you, it works. It really works. Peter Coffin is always telling me if the crooks only knew how much money you could make by being honest, they'd all behave differently. Warren has a wonderful saying I like. He says, "You take the high road, it's never crowded." and it's worked. Take the Daily Journal Corporation. We made quite a few millions of dollars out of the foreclosure boom because we published legal notices and we dominated the publication of foreclosure notices in the worst real estate depression in the history of modern times. And we could have raised our prices at the time and made more tens of millions of dollars. But we didn't do it. You know, when your fellow citizens are losing their damn houses in the worst recession, Charlie Munger, billionaire, raises prices. If it would look lousy on the front page of the paper for people around the honest way, should you do it? And the answer is no, of course not. Particularly when Warren always said it's probably always a mistake to marry for money, and it's really stupid if you're already rich. and it's really stupid when you're already rich to get a reputation of being a total no-goodnik. Rick Guerin always loved the story about the guy who had been a total miscreant all his life, and he died, and the minister said, now is the time in the funeral ceremony when somebody says something nice about the deceased. And nobody came forward, and nobody came forward, and nobody came forward. Finally, one guy stood up, and he said, well, he said his brother was worse. Well, you can laugh, but there are people like that. When Harry Cohn died here, the saying was everybody went to the funeral to make sure he was dead. and so there are a few simple truths that really work. And when it gets to this difficult business the Daily Journal is in, I would say it is a real pleasure to be serving these courts and agencies. They need the automation. Other people are trying to take advantage of them in ways that we aren't. And we're struggling against the odds, a little tiny company. And we're taking a lot of territory. It's slow going, but the prospects are good. And of course, the nice thing about being rich is it doesn't matter if it's a little slow. And how did we get rich? Well, we remembered Grandpa Ingham, and when one of the few opportunities came along, we reached out and seized it. Think of how your life works. In my life, to give another example, the Mungers would have twice the assets they now have if I hadn't made one mistake of omission back in the 1970s. And really stupid. And I blew an opportunity that would have doubled my present net worth. That is a normal life. You get one or two. And how things work out, it's the basis. We all know people that are out married, their spouses are so much better. Think what a good decision that was for them. And what a lucky decision, way more important than money. And a lot of them did it when they were young, they stumbled into it. Now, you don't have to stumble into it. You can be very careful. A lot of people are wearing signs, danger, danger, do not touch, and people just charge right ahead. That's a mistake. Well, you can laugh, but it's still a horrible mistake. And it's been fun for the people on this board to know one another and work on these oddball things and to handle life's vicissitudes. Of course, it's very peculiar that we're so old. I can tell a couple of other stories, too, because you like stories. Here's an apocryphal story that is very instructive. A young man comes to visit Mozart. And he says, Mozart, he says, I want to write symphonies. And Mozart says, how old are you? And the man says, I'm 23. And Mozart says, you're too young to write symphonies. And he says, but Mozart, he says, you were writing symphonies when you were 10 years old. And Mozart says, yes, but I wasn't asking other people how to do it. Now there's another Mozart story. Here's the greatest musical talent maybe that ever lived. And what was his life like? Well, he was bitterly unhappy and he died young. That's the life of Mozart. What the hell did Mozart do to screw it up? To make himself, well, he did two things that are guaranteed to create a lot of misery. He overspent his income scrupulously. That's number one. That is really stupid. And the other thing was he was full of jealousies and resentments. If you'll overspend your income and be full of jealousy and resentments, you can have a lousy, unhappy life and die young. All you've got to do is learn from Mozart. you can also learn from that young man who was asking Mozart how to write symphony. The truth of the matter is that not everybody can learn everything. Some people are way the hell better. And of course, no matter how hard you try, there's always some guy that achieves more, some guy or gal. And my answer is, so what? Does any of us need to be the very top of the whole world? It's ridiculous. And another thing that people do that I regard as amazing is they build these enormous mausoleums. I think they figure they want people to walk by that mausoleum and say, gosh, I wish I were in there. Anyway, you can see we've had some fun as we go along, and it's worked so well, but if you actually figure out how many decisions were made in the history of the Daily Journal Corporation or the history of Berkshire Hathaway, it wasn't very many per year that were meaningful. It's a game of being there all the time and recognizing the rare opportunity when it comes and recognizing that a normal human allotment is to not have very many. Now, there's a very confident bunch of people who sell securities who act as though they've got an endless supply of wonderful opportunities. Well, those people are the equivalent of the racetrack tout. They're not even respectable. It's not a good way to live your life, to pretend to know a lot of stuff you don't know and pretend to furnish you a lot of opportunities you're not furnishing. And my advice to you is avoid those people, but not if you're running a stock brokerage firm. You need them. But it's not the right way to make money. And this business of controlling the costs and living simply, and that was the secret. How much money? Warren and I had tiny little bits of money. We always underspent our incomes, and we invested, and if you live long enough, you end up rich. It's not very complicated. And now there is a part of life which is, how do you scramble out of your mistakes without them costing too much? And we've done some of that too. And if you look at Berkshire Hathaway, think of its founding businesses: a doomed department store, a doomed New England textile company, and a doomed trading stamp company. Out of that came Berkshire Hathaway. Now, we handled those losing hands pretty well, and we bought into them very cheaply. But of course, the success came from changing our ways and getting into the better businesses. And it isn't that we were so good at doing things that were difficult. We were good at avoiding things that were difficult, finding things that are easy.